and welcome to Speak, Feed, Lead podcast with Jackie Bailey. My listeners and I have a goal. That is to help you speak with power, feed others in word and deed, and lead with a positive influence. Today I'm going to be interviewing Diane Bailey Nutz. She is the author of Look in Me, A Life Shaped by the Most Overlooked. She is a wife and mother of 8 children, lives a very active life, and in fact has been active in providing an invaluable service to individuals whom she calls the population of the unique. Welcome, Diane Nutz.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I'm doing great. Did you do your Zumba this morning?
Oh, of course. Keep up with my work and grandkids.
Diane is a licensed Zumba instructor, and I understand Diane does some volunteer Zumba teaching, and she has been working for many years with individuals whom she calls the population of the unique, those that we might consider disabled in some way. Diane, how did you get started to work with these individuals?
Well, it started back when I was a teenager. My father was manager of 3 different thrift stores back in the 60s, and I would go to his store and help him work with people who were back then labeled the retarded. I always hated that word. It sounded offensive, and so thankfully society has come a long ways in erasing that word most of the time. It's gone to disabled, to high functioning, to different labels. But like I said, I like saying the unique because to me they're just as important as the rest of us. Back then, I was involved with a service club in high school, and we had opportunity to sit with some of the developmentally delayed, which is what they refer to them today, at a football game. So my first experience one-on-one for at least 30 minutes was with a teenage gal who was mentally delayed, and we were watching this football game, and I noticed that she loved watching the cheerleaders. And I think in my book I referred to her as Carol. I asked Carol, would you like to be a cheerleader someday? And she says, oh, no, I could never do that. And I says, well, you should be able to do whatever you want. And she said, no, I could never do that because my dad says I'm retarded. And even as a 17-year-old, that just broke my heart that, her own father would tell her that. That's just how it was back then. As I went through life, I married and had 4 children. All of a sudden, I found myself going through a divorce. I needed to work, so I started working in the school system. I had 3 children that were going to school, and then 1 that I would have to put in daycare. And I found myself substituting for special ed in all different types of jobs, junior high through, down to elementary school and even school age now that I look back on it. And so that's how I got into the field. Every time they would call me and they would ask, would you work for people that are handicapped? I said, sure. And it blew them away. I got accustomed to that, helping my dad and being around him in the service club in high school and things, so I was pretty comfortable with it.
It sounds like the school system had a difficult time getting people to work with these unique children. And so no wonder they were so happy for you to do it. Does that sound about right?
It is more difficult when you think about being around people that slobber, or you might have to change their diapers and they're grown adults. Uncomfortable situation for most people. And I'm not saying it was pleasant for me. I'm just saying I could do it, and I felt like I was being of service to them, and it was making me be a better person, appreciating the blessings that I had. I stayed in the field because I felt there was a need And probably would have been better for us financially if I would have gotten a college degree and made more money doing something else. It was just so hard for me to leave the families that needed help. It's really hard to find someone that they can trust with their special children. Some of them can't speak, can't do anything for themselves. It's just, having 8 healthy children, it just made me feel so blessed that my kids were all healthy.
I never thought about the struggle or the challenge it must be for these families who have these very unique children and need to find someone who they know will love them and care for them as they would. And any inconsistency in that care by personnel must even add to that challenge by large amounts.
Yeah, that's such a good point because, to imagine the inconsistencies that they have in their life, it's hard enough for the typical child to get different teachers during the school year, perhaps, or parents divorce and they don't know what to make of, how come I can't be with mom and dad at the same time? But kids are even on a more shaky grounds, and to have all that inconsistency with people changing all the time must be such turmoil for them. I have had clients for over 20 years.
So let's think about this. If you have cared for some of these children for 20 years, that means you have cared for them since they were very young children up through their adulthood.
I had one when he was born, and he passed away at age 21. I had him all those years. His sister was 3 years older. I still have her. These are 2 children that were both, completely relying on somebody else to do everything for them. They couldn't speak, they couldn't dress, they couldn't eat, they couldn't go to the restroom, they couldn't do anything. But they brought personality into our home. We just have loved them.
How often were you caring for these children? Did you take care of them once a week or every day? What was your schedule like?
Well, what happened was after I was working in the schools, 5 days a week, a parent mentioned to me that I could do respite and habilitation. I didn't even know what that was. So respite is where the parent gets a reprieve and their child can either be taken to a provider's home or the provider, which would be me, would go to their home. I found out that the parents wanted a break from the kids, take them to my home. My home was certified, so it's safe, and they would interview with me and some of my children when our children lived at home. And so the state would allow them so many hours of respite or habilitation per month. Now, normally in Arizona, that's about 60 hours per service a month, 2 to 3 times a week if they were my respite client. So the 2 that I was talking to you about, she would get 60 hours per child, and they would come to my house 2 or 3 times a week. So this has been ongoing for 22 years, about 24 years. Sometimes I lose track of how old these kids are that I've had for so long.
What an incredible service you're performing, Diane, not just for the people who need your care, but for the parents and the family members of these individuals who must have realized early on that their child is never going to go off to school or to college anyway. They're never going to get married or have a family of their own. They are going to be needing care for their entire lives. Do you find that these particular individuals also have a shortened lifespan due to their disabilities or health problems that arise because of the disability?
Yeah, the children with the disabilities definitely have a shortened lifespan, but the medical advances have come such a long ways that one gal that I've had for about 18 years, she's going to be 40, and because of her good care from her parents and the medical professors, thriving as well as she can, and she's come a long ways. She has Down syndrome. You know, she's my buddy. Just been in our family since she was about 15, and they just become part of the family. What I've seen with some of the families is if they aren't very affluent, the parents never get to take a vacation. Can't imagine that. You know, you need time away sometimes.
I can imagine having such a physically exhausting challenge every day caring for your children would certainly take a toll on you.
Yeah, the children that require total care, can you imagine having to always lift them, to bathe them, lift them, to change them, lift them, to dress them? You know, it's not only emotionally exhausting, but physically exhausting too.
So Zumba must come in handy to help you maintain physical strength and stamina that you need for this job then.
There were things beyond my control. The worst thing that happened to me was I had a back problem that resulted from a surgery that wasn't checked up on for years, and so I ended up having to have spinal fusion. And that 3 years before I decided to give in and have surgery was really tough. You know, I would try to make sure that my husband Dan was here when I knew that I would need to lift this heavy individual to feed them or change them. And that was just a hard time for me to get through. But I like being active. I like to skate still, played with my kids, played with the grandkids. You know, I'm not a sit-down type of person, thankfully.
Are you still working even today?
I have 2 left right now that I'm working with because my husband and I are going to be serving a church mission in May. These families, bless their heart, they have to find a different person after I've cared for their child over 20 years. I'm trying to make that transition easy for them and trying to help them locate someone that they can trust.
Diane, is there a particular reason that you wrote your book at this particular time?
I started thinking of all my experiences, all the stories that I could share to try to open up some awareness for the rest of the world who hasn't had experience with the unique population. To me, it seems like we're raised in a world that is judged on our appearance, and as time goes on, as I raise my own children, I saw it get more and more intense where there's a standard that you are felt to mean like you need to keep up with in order to be normal. And so when a person comes along who's not typical in appearance, we just have a tendency to shy away from that and not even give them the opportunity to experience, you know, socializing with others.
Diane, your book is full of stories and experiences that you've had with these individuals. Is there one that stands out or has had a particularly strong impact on you?
It's hard to think about one. The family that really humbled me more than others because they had disabled quadruplets. They had a child about a year and a half before the quads were born, and the quads were born very early, and they were not expected to live. 2 girls and 2 boys, beautiful, beautiful children. They were in and out of the hospital constantly for the first few years. They are now, I think they're 21 years old. I might be wrong. It might be 22 by now. I went to their home because they had 4. They're a quiet, humble family. They don't get attention. They don't crave that attention that some people